Oliver Bennett was 29 years old, lived in a one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street in Chicago, and had spent 4 years as a senior copywriter at Aldridge & Partners. Being genuinely good at a job, his boss, Greg Harrington, was getting all the credit for. Greg was 43, wore blazers with the sleeves pushed up, and said things like, "blue sky thinking, people," and "let's circle back on that," while walking Oliver's campaigns into boardrooms as though he'd composed them on the way up in the elevator. He had contributed to the Fresh Brew account by requesting that one chart be made bluer and nodding warmly at the tagline Oliver had written at 11 at night. He had contributed to Pinnacle Insurance by telling the client the concept was a product of the team's collective energy, which was technically true in the sense that Oliver was on the team. Greg was, in summary, a man who had built a reputation on other people's foundations and grown very comfortable there. Oliver had noticed. But he was up for a promotion, senior creative director, a salary bump of roughly $23,000, and an office with a door, and had told himself he'd deal with Greg properly once he had the leverage. He had a girlfriend too, Claire Donovan, 27, red hair, a laugh that could fill a room, 2 years and 3 months together. He'd been quietly saving for a ring, $4,000 over 7 months of skipped lunches. His best friend was Sam Torres, 29, IT at a startup, who could make any situation funnier by narrating it in real time. At the office his ally was Mike Reeves, 31, junior art director, reliable witness to everything that happened in every meeting. This was Oliver Bennett's life on the morning of Monday, January the 15th, 2024. By any reasonable measure, a good one. By the end of the morning, considerably more complicated. It started, as so many disasters do, with a phone charger. Oliver had left it at the office Friday, remembered Monday at 7:30 when his phone died. He headed in early, found the charger behind his monitor the way chargers always manage to be, and was walking back to the elevator when he heard voices from Greg's glass-walled office at the end of the hall. The blinds were half closed. Not entirely. He slowed. He wasn't a snoop, but the voices were animated and close in a way that registered before his conscious mind caught up. He looked through the gap. Greg was sitting on the edge of his desk. Leaning against the wall next to him, holding a coffee cup, her red hair pulled back, was Claire. His Claire. They were laughing, the close kind that requires faces about 8 inches apart. Then Greg reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Claire's ear, and Claire smiled the particular smile she used when she was genuinely delighted, and Oliver's stomach performed a full somersault with a half twist. He stood still for 5 seconds. Then he walked quietly to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby, and sat on a bench outside in the January cold for 20 minutes, staring at a pigeon that stared back with more sympathy than he'd expected from a pigeon. He called Sam. "It's 8 in the morning," Sam said by way of greeting. "Claire is in Greg's office," Oliver said. A pause. "Why?" "That is exactly the question." "What were they doing?" He touched her hair. "They were very close." "They were laughing." A longer pause. "Oliver." "Yeah. Don't do anything rash. I'm outside in January. My coat isn't very thick. Go inside. Act completely normal. Can you do that?" Oliver looked at the pigeon. The pigeon ruffled its feathers. "I'll try." He went back upstairs, sat at his desk with his charger plugged in, and arranged his face into something approximating normal. Claire arrived at 8:45, she'd started at Aldridge & Partners 8 months ago as an account coordinator, kissed him on the cheek as she passed and said, "Morning, you," and Oliver said, "Morning," and smiled, and thought, she was in his office at 8 in the morning. He spent the day doing quiet, focused research. He thought about the last 2 months, Claire working late, her phone angled away when it buzzed, the times she'd seemed somewhere else mid-conversation. He'd filed it all under, "she's just busy," because he was a person who extended the benefit of the doubt right up until the moment that doubt walked into a glass office and got its hair touched. He called Sam from a small conference room over a roast beef sandwich. When someone burns your whole life down, is it appropriate to rebuild it into something that makes them deeply regret it? That depends on how you define appropriate. Moderately. Then yes, Sam said. "What are you thinking?" "Confirm what I saw first. Then think carefully about how this ends." "Nothing illegal." "Sam, please. You have that look in your voice, the quiet, dangerous one. That's what worries me." "I'll be fine," Oliver said. "Better than fine, eventually." He confirmed it on Wednesday without drama. Greg left the office at 6:15 on Tuesday. Claire texted at 6:12 to say she was working late. Greg's dark blue Audi, a car he was very proud of, was absent from the parking structure at 6:40. Claire arrived home at 8:05, which was punctual enough to suggest planning. On Wednesday morning, in the inside pocket of a jacket he'd lent Claire in November and recently reclaimed, he found a restaurant receipt. Dinner for two at the Lantern on West Adams Street. November the 3rd, a Friday when Claire had told him she was at a work event. Total, $212. Greg's name on the credit card slip. Oliver held it for a long time. He took a photo of it, returned it to the pocket, and made a note in his bedside notebook. He was starting a file. Organization was going to be important. On Saturday the 20th, he met Sam at Callahan's, sticky menus, excellent chicken wings, and laid out everything. Sam listened with the focused silence of a man trying not to say, "I told you something was off," because he'd already said it twice. "It's a plan," Sam said when Oliver finished. "The part with the presentation is going to be either the funniest thing I've ever heard or a complete disaster. Both outcomes are acceptable to me right now. What about Claire? I'm going to break up with her. But not yet, not until everything is in motion. If I confront her now, she tells Greg, Greg goes on the defensive, and I lose the element of surprise. That's cold. She had dinner with my boss in November and lied to my face." "Fair point," Sam said immediately. "What do you need from me?" Oliver smiled for the first time in a week, small, internal, the kind that lives behind the eyes. "Technical help," he said. "And your moral support." "You have both," Sam said. "Obviously." Oliver laid it out in his notebook that weekend. Gerald the goldfish watched from the bowl with what Oliver chose to interpret as encouraging regard. Stage 1, Documentation. For years of emails, drafts, and creative briefs, a paper trail demonstrating that the work attributed to Greg Harrington had originated entirely with Oliver Bennett. Compiled into an organized folder, backed up on 2 external hard drives. Stage 2, the presentation. In 3 weeks, February the 9th, Aldridge & Partners was hosting its annual showcase day, presentations to CEO Victor Aldridge, senior partners, and major clients. Greg planned to present the Fresh Brew campaign, the Pinnacle Insurance rebrand, and the Hartley Homes series, all 3 written entirely by Oliver. Oliver intended to be in that room when he did it. Stage 3, the promotion. The senior creative director decision was due in February. Oliver intended to ensure it was made correctly. Stage 4, Claire. Clean, clear, at a time of his choosing. Not in anger. Not in a scene. Stage 5, Greg. This was the part Sam had called borderline brilliant. This was the part Oliver was most looking forward to. Starting January the 22nd, Oliver quietly forwarded himself copies of every brief, draft, and creative document he'd generated over 4 years, spread across several days so the sent folder didn't look like a data migration event. With Mike Reeves's help, he confirmed exactly how little Greg had contributed. "Random question," Oliver said over lunch. "The Fresh Brew campaign, where did the original brief come from?" Mike looked up from his salad. "Morning worth waking for?" "Yeah. You wrote it at 11 at night and texted me asking if it sounded stupid. I said it was great." Greg walked it into the client meeting the next morning and told them it came to him in the shower. Oliver nodded pleasantly. "Right. Thanks, Oliver." Mike put down his fork. "I know Greg told a client the Pinnacle campaign was a product of his creative vision. I was in the room. I've been thinking someone should know about this eventually." A pause. "Is it eventually?" "It's getting there," Oliver said. "And if someone had 3 years of clear recollections of who wrote what, that would be very useful." Mike pointed at him with his fork. "I'm in. Whatever it is." On January the 26th, Oliver walked into Linda Walsh's office and asked to speak confidentially about the promotion. Linda was a precise woman in her early 50s who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and had the organizational memory of a Swiss hard drive. She removed the glasses, set them on the chain, and gave him her full attention. "Of course. Close the door." He placed a manila folder on her desk, printed, organized, labeled with dates and project names, tabbed by campaign. A documented record of my contributions. Everything cross-referenced with project files. IT can verify it against the server records. Linda opened the folder and turned several pages without expression. She looked up. Did you compile all of this yourself? Yes. I'll review it thoroughly. She closed it flat on the desk. Can I keep this copy? Absolutely. I have several. Several, she repeated, and looked at him steadily. You're much more calculated than you seem, Oliver. I prefer the word thorough, he said. Then, on January the 30th, something unexpected happened. Greg called an emergency creative review. Change of plans on Hartley Homes, he announced at the morning stand-up, crisp and casual, eyes not quite meeting Oliver's. Donna, I want you to take point on the spring campaign. Fresh perspective. He moved on immediately. Nobody said anything. Mike caught Oliver in the corridor afterward. His voice was low. He knows something. He knows something is wrong, Oliver said. He doesn't know what. What if he pulls you from the showcase entirely? Oliver had been thinking about this since the moment Greg said Donna's name with that particular nonchalant authority, the tone of a man reasserting territory he could sense was being disputed. He can't. The showcase is built on Fresh Brew, Pinnacle, and Hartley, all three came from my desk. If he suddenly subs me out, clients will ask questions. He needs me, even if he doesn't understand that yet. He's going to make your life difficult until February. I've been making his presentations look good for 4 years, Oliver said. I can handle 2 weeks of Hartley Homes spring. It was 3 weeks, in the end. Greg stopped copying Oliver on certain email threads. He ran 2 creative direction sessions Oliver wasn't invited to. He praised Donna's preliminary Hartley ideas in the stand-up in a way that was specifically calibrated to remind Oliver of what he was no longer part of. Oliver smiled, did his work, and did not take the bait. He called Sam that evening from his apartment, Gerald's bowl on the table in front of him. He's trying to sideline me, Oliver said. He just feels the ground shifting and his instinct is to push me out. Has he done anything concrete? Anything that changes what you submitted to Linda? Not yet. Then you still have time. And Oliver, you forwarded yourself 4 years of creative documents without setting off a single alarm. You brought a manila folder to HR with section dividers. You are about to make a Labrador appear in a coffee commercial. What more could you have done? Oliver looked at Gerald. Gerald looked back with the equanimity of a creature that existed outside of time. The section dividers were probably excessive. The section dividers, Sam said, were a stroke of genius. Hold your nerve. That was, against all reasonable probability, exactly what Oliver needed to hear. The file swap was Oliver's only true piece of engineering, and it was a small masterpiece. The Fresh Brew campaign included a short video montage of morning moments, coffee steam, sunrise windows, people smiling at their mugs in golden light. Greg loved to gesture at it impressively. What Greg did not know was that Oliver had kept both the polished final version and a very early rough cut, one that included someone's elbow, a cameraman's reflection in a coffee cup, and, for reasons no one had ever fully explained, a brief shot of a confused Labrador retriever staring directly into the lens. Oliver saved the rough cut with an almost identical file name. On February the 1st, helping Greg's assistant Carla set up the presentation laptop, he performed a quiet file swap that took less than 4 seconds. He told Sam about it that evening. Sam laughed so hard he spilled his drink. A Labrador, Sam said. In a coffee commercial. Just in the rehearsal, Oliver clarified. Not in front of clients. Just enough to rattle him. By the end of the rehearsal on February the 2nd, which Oliver heard about extensively from Mike, Greg had stopped the video 3 times, switched laptops twice, and spent 47 bewildered minutes before locating the correct file. The Labrador appeared twice. Each time, Greg went completely silent for about 10 seconds, staring at the screen with the expression of a man who had recently made some very questionable life choices and was beginning to suspect the universe was keeping score. 47 minutes? Oliver asked. I counted, Mike said. Good, Oliver said. Good. February the 2nd, the same day as Greg's Labrador-related existential crisis, Oliver designated as Stage 4. He cooked dinner. Pasta with brown butter, sage, and shaved Parmesan, the dish Claire had once called her favorite thing he made. He set the table properly and opened a bottle of wine. When she arrived at 7, she looked pleasantly surprised. She sat down, ate, declared it delicious. Oliver agreed, because it genuinely was. After dinner, he said, quite calmly, I know about Greg. Claire went completely still. I found the receipt from the lantern, he said. November the 3rd. She closed her eyes. That was the moment she understood exactly what kind of conversation this was going to be. For a few seconds she said nothing. Then, Oliver, it wasn't. How long, he asked. He'd told himself he wouldn't, but the question came out anyway. A pause. Since October, she said quietly. He got up and refilled his wine, because he needed something to do with his hands. He stood at the kitchen counter and did the arithmetic. October, November, December, January. 4 months. He thought about Christmas, how she'd been warm and strange by turns, and he'd told himself it was stress. He thought about the ring savings. $4,000. 14 skipped lunches. He turned back. He kept his voice level. I'd like you to go. Oliver, her face moved through several difficult stages. I'm sorry, she said. She meant it, he could see she meant it, which almost made it worse. I didn't plan it. It wasn't supposed to. I know, he said. But it did. She stood. She picked up her coat and her bag. At the door she paused, and turned, and looked at him the way people look when they've done something they cannot undo and they know it and they know you know it. You're too good, she said. You know that. That's always been the problem. He thought about this for a moment. Apparently, he said. She left. He stood in the kitchen for a while. Then he went back to the table and sat down. The apartment was quiet, just the street below and Gerald doing slow laps in his bowl. Oliver poured her wine into his glass and stared at the table. He let himself feel what he felt, which was more than he'd expected, something heavy and formless and tired. Not anger, exactly. Not quite grief. The specific weight of a thing that had been running without him for 4 months and was now over. He sat with it for a while, which felt like the honest thing to do. Then he put on a jazz record and finished both glasses and thought about October, whether knowing earlier would have changed anything, and eventually decided it probably wouldn't have. That was both better and worse than he expected. Gerald watched from the windowsill with his customary ancient calm. Yeah, Oliver said. I know. A pause. Stage 5, he said. The week of February the 5th, Oliver went to work every day wearing the composed, amiable expression of someone with no particular agenda, which is the most dangerous possible expression a person can wear when they absolutely do have one. On Tuesday the 6th, Linda Walsh met with him again. She'd done her homework. I've cross-referenced these with server timestamps and project files, she said. Everything checks out. I assumed it would, Oliver said. Victor, Mr. Aldridge, will be in Friday for the final review before the showcase. I think he should see some of this beforehand. Whatever you think is appropriate, Linda. Before the main showcase, at 9 in the morning in the 5th floor boardroom, there was a smaller, quieter meeting. Oliver attended by invitation. So did Linda Walsh and 2 senior partners. And so, with an expression of controlled puzzlement, did Greg Harrington, told only there was a pre-showcase organizational matter to address. Victor Aldridge was 60 years old and had the grounded energy of someone who had built a company from nothing and still remembered every step of how. He opened the folder Linda distributed without ceremony. Greg opened his copy and went, within 4 seconds, completely still. Linda walked through what the documents contained. Victor turned pages in silence. Then he looked at Oliver. You wrote the Fresh Brew campaign. Pinnacle Insurance. Hartley Homes. Yes. All 3. Mike Reeves handled the visual design on Pinnacle. Victor looked at Greg. Greg's face was doing things it was not normally called upon to do. Greg, Victor said, with the tone of a man asking a question he already knew the answer to, what was your contribution to these campaigns? The pause stretched long and uncomfortable. I guided the direction, Greg said. The team. The records show you reviewed finished drafts, Linda said, not unkindly but not gently. The originating documents are Oliver's. Greg opened his mouth. Closed it. He was a man who had survived 4 years of boardrooms on confidence and selective presentation, now discovering that confidence without substance is just a face you make. Victor turned back to Oliver. I'd like you to say a few words at this afternoon's showcase about your creative process. Consider it part of the presentation. Oliver kept his expression perfectly composed. Of course. Greg spent the remaining hours at his desk with the posture of a man who has experienced an earthquake in a building he was quite certain was very sturdy. The showcase began at 2 o'clock. 50 chairs. Clients from Fresh Brew, Pinnacle Insurance, and Hartley Homes, 2 prospective clients, a catering spread notably nicer than usual. Greg walked in looking professionally composed, blazer sleeves pushed up, clicker in hand, outward confidence intact. He opened with Fresh Brew, pressing the clicker to reveal "Morning Worth Waking For" in the clean font Oliver had spent 2 days selecting. He was halfway through Pinnacle Insurance when Victor said pleasantly, from the front row, "Could we pause, Greg? Oliver, would you come up and walk us through the creative origination on the Pinnacle campaign?" The room went very quiet. Oliver stood, walked to the front, and looked at the slide behind him. His slide. His words. His idea. He took a breath. The insight behind the Pinnacle rebrand, he said, started with a question: why do people feel uncomfortable talking about insurance? Those conversations are built around fear. We wanted to reframe the relationship, not protection as a product, but as partnership. Not, "We'll cover you if things go wrong," but "We're with you, whatever happens." Everything else followed from that: the tagline, the visual language, the tone. Francis Doyle, the Pinnacle Insurance representative who had attended the campaign's original launch, looked at Oliver with clear recognition. "That's almost word for word how it was pitched to us," she said. "You were in that original meeting, Oliver." "I wrote the brief," Oliver said. "And the pitch?" Francis looked at Greg. Greg looked at his clicker. The clicker offered no assistance. "Interesting," Francis said, in the tone that means considerably more than the word. Victor asked Oliver to continue through all 3 campaigns. He did, thorough and clear, discussing every nuance in the way that only the person who'd actually created them could, the reasoning, the alternatives, the moments where one idea replaced another and why. Mike Reeves, in the 4th row wearing his best blue shirt, sat very straight with the expression of a man watching something excellent happen in real time. At the end, Victor addressed the room. "Aldridge & Partners consistently delivers exceptional creative work," he said. "It's important that we know where that work comes from, and that we invest in the people who produce it. I'll have an announcement about our creative team structure next week." Greg completed the rest of the showcase on professional autopilot, functioning, breathing, saying the right words. Oliver could see from 4 rows back that he was already somewhere else in his head. Petra Collins, 25, from accounts in the 3rd row, leaned to her colleague and said in a whisper slightly louder than intended, "Did that just happen?" Oliver heard it on the way back to his seat. He sat down next to Mike. Mike leaned over. "Blue shirt," he murmured. "Good call." On Tuesday the 13th of February, Victor Aldridge offered Oliver the senior creative director position, a salary of $64,000 a year, an increase of $23,000, and the office with the door that closed. Oliver accepted. He shook Victor's hand, walked back through the open-plan floor, glanced at Marcus Webb humming his eternal 4 bars, and felt a wave of genuine affection for the men who would soon be doing it on the other side of a wall. Greg was simultaneously moved into a client liaison role. Not fired, his offense had been a sustained pattern rather than a single terminable act, but relocated to different work, without Oliver's campaigns to stand on. He would need to build a reputation from scratch. Oliver almost felt bad about this. Almost. Now here's the part Sam would describe at every social gathering for the next 2 years as the unplanned comedy bonus. Through the usual channels, Mike heard it from Petra, who had it from accounts. It emerged that Greg had been seeing Claire for approximately 6 weeks, having begun in late December. The relationship had the considerable misfortune of coinciding exactly with Greg's demotion. On the morning after the showcase, Greg apparently explained his newly reduced circumstances to Claire, who had begun seeing him at peak confidence, Greg with the important title, and the relationship did not survive the week of February the 12th. Oliver heard this on a Wednesday and was quiet for a moment. "You're not going to feel bad about that?" Mike asked carefully. Oliver thought about it. "No," he said honestly. "But I don't feel particularly good about it either. I feel neutral." "Neutral is fine." "It's actually very fine," Oliver agreed. What made it genuinely, memorably funny was not the breakup itself. It was what happened on Valentine's Day. Oliver was at a pleasant Italian restaurant that evening, having dinner with Sam and Sam's girlfriend Natalie. He refused to sit at home on Valentine's Day cataloging his situation. About 40 minutes in, he looked across the room and saw Greg Harrington sitting alone at a table for two, in the blazer with the sleeves pushed up, holding a single rose, staring at his phone with the expression of a man who had recently experienced quite a lot of irony in a very short period of time. Oliver registered the image with the completeness of a man who would remember it for a long time, and turned back to his pasta. Sam had also seen. He put down his fork. "Oliver. I see him. Are you?" "I'm fine," Oliver said. "Pass the bread." Natalie passed the bread. "Is that him?" she whispered. "Yes. He has a rose." "For nobody," she added. "The rose is having a difficult evening," Oliver agreed, and ate the bread. He had tiramisu for dessert because it was Valentine's Day and he felt entitled to tiramisu. When they left, Greg was still at his table, the rose wilting slightly in the warmth of the room. Oliver stepped out into the February cold and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The city was lit. Couples walked past. Someone had released a heart-shaped balloon drifting north above the street. He felt something give way in his chest, not sadly, but in the way a weight is lifted, the specific lightness of someone who has put down something heavy they've been carrying without knowing how heavy it was. "You okay?" Sam asked. "Yeah," Oliver said. "Yeah, I actually am." The rest of winter, and then spring, was good. Oliver moved into the new office on February the 19th. He brought Gerald in a travel bowl and set him on the windowsill where the light was good and Gerald could contemplate the Chicago skyline with whatever goldfish experienced when they contemplated skylines. He built his creative team properly, himself, Mike, Donna, Ryan, and two junior writers who were very good and very underused. He ran the department the way he'd always believed one should, actual credit to the people who did the actual work, feedback that was specific, and meetings that ended when there was nothing left to say. The Fresh Brew client loved the new structure immediately. Frances Doyle from Pinnacle sent a warm email. She'd always suspected the creative intelligence came from somewhere specific. Victor stopped by on the first Friday of March and told Oliver the first quarter results were looking strong, in the understated way of someone who means exactly what he says. One additional incident, in late March, arrived via text from Mike. Greg just tried to take credit for the Hartley Homes spring campaign brief in a client call. The Hartley account manager said, "I think Oliver's team wrote that, Greg." Greg said, "Right, yes, I mean I was referring to the departmental vision." Petra from accounts, "Which department, though?" It has been 2 minutes and Greg has not answered Petra's question. Oliver read this at his desk and laughed quietly, the kind that escapes before you mean it to. He looked at Gerald on the windowsill. "It's going well," he said. Gerald glimmered slightly in the light. It was Sam who introduced him, in the first week of April, to Sophie Mercer. She was 28, an environmental consultant downtown, with dark brown hair and direct opinions about things, including restaurants, public transport, and whether the croissants from the corner bakery were as good as the ones on Michigan Avenue. Sam mentioned her with the particular casualness that told Oliver he'd been thinking about this for a while. They met at a dinner at Sam and Natalie's apartment, an event engineered with considerable precision by Natalie, who had excellent instincts for seating arrangements. Sophie was placed next to Oliver. Within 20 minutes they'd covered the croissant debate, the French press versus pour-over question. Oliver defended the French press, Sophie was pro-pour-over but conceded it was labor-intensive for Monday mornings, and a shared bafflement at how one specific intersection had managed to have roadworks for 3 consecutive years. She was very good company. She said interesting things, laughed at his jokes, and pushed back when she disagreed in the direct, unfussy way of a person who was secure in her own views. He liked that very much. They exchanged numbers at the end of the evening. Oliver texted the next morning, French press confirmed, cleaner oils, fuller body. The science is on my side. She replied in 10 minutes, the pour-over produces a cleaner, more nuanced cup. The science is in fact on my side. I'll send you the link. She sent the link. He read it. He conceded 1 point. She was gracious about it. They went to dinner the following weekend, North Side, good food, dim lighting, a wine list that didn't make him flinch too much. The conversation lasted 2.5 hours without either of them checking their phone, except when he showed her a photo of Gerald, which she reacted to with the specific delight people reserve for encountering something unexpectedly charming. I had a goldfish growing up, she said. His name was Newton. Very still, very contemplative. Gerald is exactly the same way, Oliver said. Philosophical. All goldfish are philosophical, she said. They have no other option, really. He walked her home. At her door, she looked at him with the unhurried look of someone thinking something through and not in a rush about it. This was good, she said. Very good, he agreed. Same time next week. Absolutely. He walked home feeling light, which was both simple and enormously welcome after several months of feeling various other things. He told Gerald about it when he got in, which had become a habit he wasn't prepared to evaluate critically. 6 months later. By September, Oliver Bennett's life had rearranged itself into something considerably better than what he'd had in January, when a phone charger and a half-closed blind had sent him outside to sit with a pigeon in the cold. He was senior creative director at Aldridge & Partners, with a team he liked and had invested in properly. The Fresh Brew campaign won a regional advertising award in July, and Oliver's name was on the certificate, framed, hung on his office wall beside a Chicago postcard Mike had given him as a congratulatory gift. He was with Sophie, in the unhurried, solid way that suited them both, officially together since May, and she'd met Gerald in person and declared him distinguished-looking, which Gerald absorbed with his customary equanimity. Sam had never stopped bringing it up. At every gathering, usually unprompted. He just sat there, Sam would say. In January. In the cold. With a pigeon. The pigeon was very empathetic, Oliver always said. And then he was so calm about the whole thing. He's the calmest revenge person I've ever met. I don't think of it as revenge, Oliver said once. Sam stared at him. Really? I think of it as correction. Things were incorrect. I corrected them. Sophie, hearing this for the first time at Sam's birthday gathering in August, laughed outright. You corrected the situation, she said. Thoroughly, Oliver said. With documentation. Organized by date and cross-referenced with server records. She shook her head, still laughing. You're something else. He's a menace, Sam said proudly. I'm thorough, Oliver said. Greg Harrington continued in client liaison and was reportedly finding it more manageable as the months went on, developing a grudging competence for the less glamorous work. He'd stopped wearing the blazers with the sleeves pushed up. People adjusted. Life went on. Oliver ran into him once in the elevator in mid-August. Morning, Greg, Oliver said. Morning. Greg looked at the buttons. Then, I knew you were good, Oliver. I just didn't handle things right. It's all right, Oliver said. Greg looked at him. You're really not angry. I was for a while, Oliver said. Anger's expensive. I couldn't afford to keep paying for it. The elevator reached the 4th floor. Greg got out. Oliver continued to the 5th and didn't think about it again for the rest of the day, which was full and productive and ended with a team review that went well, after which he walked to the bakery on Michigan Avenue to meet Sophie for the croissants she'd been right were better. She was already at a small table by the window with 2 coffees and a croissant she'd started on. She looked up when he came in. 3 minutes late, she said. Traffic, he said, sitting down. You walked. Pedestrian traffic. She pushed the second croissant toward him. He took a bite. It was, he had to silently admit, excellent. Good day, she asked. Very good, he said. The pour-over this morning was exceptional, by the way. I'm sure it was. And yet, she said, with the slight lift of a person who has won but is willing to be generous about it, I acknowledge that French press has its place. That's all I've ever asked, Oliver said. Outside, the September city went about its business, cabs and cyclists and someone walking a very small dog with enormous determination. The light was the particular gold of early autumn, the kind that makes everything look slightly more significant than usual. The kind you notice. Oliver Bennett noticed it. He drank his coffee, ate his croissant, and was, in the quiet and complete way of someone who had earned it, entirely fine. Better than fine.